Good evening. How is everyone this evening? Wonderful, wonderful. I've enjoyed this so much and trying to get here after the classes that I've had. I almost wore tennis shoes tonight, but I was afraid I'd be churched by some of you if I did. But so if I've got on tennis shoes, don't church me, okay? Some of the things that Dr. McMurtry has gone over, again, I want to tell you about the road to man, explaining creation from a biblical point of view, and also exposing the fallacy of evolution. Also, Dynamania, and this DVD he has as well. It's the truth about dinosaurs, the Bible, and the fossil record. And one more thing. How many of you enjoyed last night? I mean, wasn't that great? I mean, it was just amazing. Hopefully he'll be able to go over some of it before he leaves again. See, he said, I didn't cover all I wanted to, but this book on his table in the beginning is, I hate to say this because he's not the author, but it is the best book on his table outside of his. Am I telling the truth, Doc? But anyway, it gives a lot of the pictures that we saw on the screen. I was going to try to show you. Wheel of Fortune. That was funny.
And everybody,
hello.
And everybody laughed.
I can't say it like you. There you go.
Here, I'll be the easel for you.
Thank you, Dr. White. You can this is great. But anyway, you can see, and also the continental shelves are in there as well. You can see where the opening of the crust took place and how that it started, made its way around through the world throughout this book, and it's encyclopedic. You'll enjoy this particular part of the book as well. Well, the rest, all of that book is good, and I'm going on what he told me because I have not read it yet.
You got my word.
There you go. Shows all the little volcanoes and things under the ocean, on the ocean floor. Thank you.
It's not a lightweight book.
No, it's not. That's a great book. Some of the things that he went over today were real good. He said something. He and Brother Enoch and I spent a couple hours at least together after classes today. He taught at CCA half a day. And he volunteered his time to do that. That's an applause is in order there. Tomorrow I got him in to Murphy Middle School. He's going to be able to teach there for half a day. So he's teaching my classes. But the principal said she's going to come and hear him tomorrow. So that is good. And I'd like to get him into every school, though. I mean, I just think it would be good to do that. And what it could just be an alternative to what they've already heard. And he could probably teach creation without mentioning God, crossing the barrier, which could be done. Everyone would know that he is our maker. But he went through a lot of things before we have him come teach tonight. He went through, he's been in a lot of countries and seen a lot of things, and he's just not well versed on this. Matter of fact, he has an original 1611 King James Version Bible. He said, I normally don't tell that. And he said, I don't want people breaking in my home. But he has a 1612 as well, original Bible. He's got a lot of original artifacts in his home. I asked him today, I said, me and my family was thinking about coming and staying with you. And of course I was joking, he said, well, we couldn't accommodate all of you with beds, but we do have couches and floors and I said, I'm just playing with you. And he said, but you would like to come see some things I have at my house. So you never know how we're in Florida. Sometimes we might show up on your doorstep, brother. But he just in Moscow alone, some of the things, he told me things. I just simply did not know that you don't learn in school. Enoch, did you know about that mini space shuttle? Did you know about that? Yeah, the Russians built a space shuttle just like America's, but it was it half the size? 1/2 size, and it was built during the 80s, but they couldn't afford the fuel to put it into space. Now it sits in the middle of a playground of a school, and you go by the river and you see that. But just so many things, and he went through churches and things like that. We went to Israel today, just talking, studying, and I said, I've been with Ronnie Winter, who took Neil Armstrong on his tour to the Holy Land. I said, I've been with a man named Ike who gave the lineage on the trip. So I had a historical trip, I had a lineage trip, had a trip with Eli Shukron, the top archaeologist in the Middle East. And I told him, I said, why don't you and I get a trip to Israel together, and you give the scientific part of the trip and I preach? So he said, sounds like a good plan. So we're going to work on that, and hopefully, and I'm telling you, he did tell things about Israel from a geographical standpoint that I've never heard anybody say. And it is amazing. And I have spent more time than anybody else, but again, tonight after service, if you'd like to take him over to the Huddle House or somewhere to eat and spend some time with him, talk with him, Steve, be good for your Sunday school class. Take him and spend and gather information from him. That's a good opportunity. Sitting down with him has been as intriguing as listening to him speak on the subjects that he's been speaking about. But we have become good friends this week, and I'm thankful for that. And I would like for you to make Dr. Grady McMurtry welcome again this evening as he teaches.
Thank you, good sir. Appreciate that. And thank you for the applause. I seldom get applause at the end of one of my presentations, much less at the beginning. So by faith, I congratulate you. Hello? Well, let's try this out. We've had a couple of rehearsals. Good evening. Good evening. It's getting better. You got one more night to get it right. Hello? Now, tonight I promise we're going to be talking about how there's absolutely no proof whatsoever for human evolution, and that I can teach a child how to refute human evolution. We want to take a look at a presentation called, quote, The Road to Man, unquote. Notice the 3 question marks afterwards. So it's, quote, The Road to Man, unquote. Really? Hello? Yeah, quote, The Road to Man, unquote. Really? You see, we're going to take a look at, did people really evolve from apes, or, as Charles Darwin wrote in his very famous book, Origin of the Species by Natural Selection, he said we came from monkeys. Now, evolutionists like to say, well, he meant apes. Well, maybe he meant apes, but I know what he wrote. He said monkeys. But the question is, of course, did we evolve from anything, right? So tonight, how about this? Do these look somewhat familiar to you? How many of you have seen these at least most of, if not all of your life? Hello? The illustrations you see right here have been used since roughly 1960 to promote the idea that apes evolved into people. And think with me, they show a little ape becoming a bigger ape, becoming finally a person, correct? Now you have to admit that there is a certain logic to evolution. And when you see illustrations like this, there is a certain logic to it, that little things become bigger. Well, that's might seem logical, agreed. And so there is a certain rationale, there's a certain reasonableness, certain logic to evolution. However, I have a question for you tonight. When they show you this, it does seem to have a little logic, a little plausibility to it. But how come when they show you this, they never show you the little fish walking out of the water that became the people? Hello? Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing new under the sun. I quote Ecclesiastes. Do you realize that there's nothing new about evolution? There have been evolutionists since the Garden of Eden. The fact of the matter is, there's nothing new about evolutionary philosophy. The church 2,000 years ago was dealing with the aspects scientifically of creation versus evolution. In Romans 1, Acts 17, both of which we talked about on Sunday morning, but also 2 Peter chapter 3, other verses of the Bible, the apostles were talking about the scientific aspects of creation versus evolution. Because remember what I said about evolution? Athens was the capital of evolution 2,000 years ago, correct? And there were many, many Greek philosophers prior to the birth of Christ who were teaching evolution. And 2,500 years ago, there was a Greek philosopher named Anaximander. Anaximander said, 2,500 years ago, fish walked out of the water and became people. There's nothing new under the sun. And if you go back to the book of Judges, now the book of Judges was written 3,000 to 3,400 years ago. The time, of course, between Moses, Joshua, and the kings of Israel. If you go to chapter 17 and chapter 21, it says this: when they had no one to rule over them, each man, each woman did what was right in their own eyes or sight. Is that correct? That is an evolutionary philosophy. Think with me, in order to have law, you must have a lawgiver. Evolutionists deny the existence of a lawgiver. And so when the people had no lawgiver, they became a law unto themselves. But the same philosophy goes right back to the Garden of Eden. The first sin of man and woman was the initiation of human autonomy. Autonomy is a word that means law unto self. But this teaching has been around for 2,500 years. There's nothing new under the sun. Now, when evolutionists attempt to prove two people that they evolved from apes or some kind of primate, evolutionists use four categories of physical evidence. The four categories of physical evidence are illustrated here on the screen. The first category, this is the category, the proof by hoaxes. Hoaxes. Now, please tell me, what is a hoax? Well, of course, you don't directly define a hoax as a lie, but I understand what you mean by that, of course. But it's not true. It's a fake. It's a fraud. It tain't real, right? Come on, y'all are familiar with tain't real, right? And so this is the proof by hoaxes illustrated here by the skeletal fragments of Piltdown Man. The second category of proof, shown here by the illustration of the tooth of Nebraska man, this is called the proof by misrepresentations. The proof by misrepresentations. The third category of proof, shown here by the skull of this Australopithecus, this is called the proof by the bones of dead apes. And the fourth category, here shown by the skull of this Neanderthal, this is called the proof by the bones of dead people. Neanderthals have always been classified as Homo sapiens since they were first found in the mid-1800s. So we have hoaxes, misrepresentations, we have the bones of dead apes, and the bones of dead people. Those are the four classes of physical evidence that evolutionists use in an attempt to prove that people evolved from some form of primate. Now, we're going to take a look at the second one first, because in looking at the misrepresentations, it only takes us about 3 minutes, and we won't have to talk about it the rest of tonight. What about misrepresentations? The tooth of Nebraska man was found in 1922 in what is today our state of Nebraska. It was declared to be the tooth of a prehuman, a subhuman, living at some time in the distant past in what is today the state of Nebraska. And based upon finding this one tooth, an illustrator for the Illustrated London News actually drew what Nebraska man looked like. And his friend or wife, I've never figured that one out, his horses, his camel, and his club, all from one tooth. Aren't you impressed? Come on, folks. That's really good stuff, right? Yeah. However, 5 years later, in 1927, evolutionary-believing anthropologists digging at the same location in Nebraska proved categorically that this was not the tooth of a prehuman or subhuman. It was, in fact, the tooth of an extinct species of pig. So this is actually the tooth of porcine man. He was a real porker. Look, take the one you like and throw the rest away. Is that fair enough? And so this illustrates what misrepresentations are. The tooth was a real tooth. It was not a fake, a fraud. It was not a hoax. It was a real tooth. But it was misrepresented to begin with and then later corrected. And that's all you have to know about misrepresentations. Now let's go back to proof category number 1, hoaxes, illustrated by Piltdown Man. Now, the fragments of Piltdown Man were found in 1912 in the deep southeast corner of England near Canterbury Cathedral, but in a location that gave it the name Piltdown. Now, these pieces were found in 1912 and declared to be proof of human evolution, the fragments of a prehuman, a subhuman, living at some time in the distant past in what is today deep southeast England. And the pieces were taken to the British Museum of Natural History, truly one of the world's greatest, largest natural history museums, and put on display as proof of human evolution until 1953. Then in 1953, evolutionists admitted the following. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the fragments, the illustration of the fragments that were found of the skull, jaw, and teeth. In 1953, remember, they were found in 1912. But in 1953, real, live, legitimate scientists were allowed to take a look at these fragments and found that the jaw was not human. It was actually that of a 10 to an 11-year-old orangutan that had died approximately 500 years ago, probably in Borneo. The teeth were not human teeth. They were actually fossil chimpanzee teeth that had been filed down with a modern metal file to make the chimpanzee teeth look more human. When you see the actual picture, which I will show you, you will notice how absolutely flat the teeth are on the top because they've been filed down with a modern metal file to make them look more human. The skull fragments were in fact human. However, at the back of the skull here, there was a mark from a modern steel tool. Today, we now know that this is a skull dug up in a medieval cemetery. How y'all doing so far? Let me show you the actual pictures. Take a look at those teeth up here. You see how absolutely flat those are? But they are fossil chimpanzee teeth filed down, an orangutan jaw chemically stained to make it look older than it actually is. Now, in 1953, what I have just shared with you was announced to the public. However, the evolutionists at the British Museum of Natural History knew what I just shared with you in 1923. They waited 30 years to tell the public. Don't you love the integrity of evolutionists? Hello? But they knew this in 1923, but didn't tell the public for 30 years. And there are two men whose names I would like you to remember. You see, one is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black, evolutionary-believing scientist. Both of these men were involved with the finding of the fragments of Piltdown Man in 1912. The reason I mention their names is you want to remember their names because you're going to see them again. Hello? Well, let's just remind ourselves. What we have here is a medieval human skull. We have a 500-year-old orangutan jaw and chimpanzee fossil teeth. How y'all doing? Well, let's move on just a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an illustration from evolutionists. Please understand, if you were here last night, you know that I do not agree with the dates on this. This is not from a creationist source. This is from an evolutionary source. But it illustrates the method that evolutionists use in attempting to prove to people they evolved from apes. You see, when evolutionists attempt to prove that people evolved or anything else, It doesn't matter whether it's butterflies, dinosaurs, horses, or people. This is their favorite method of proof, but it is the second worst method of proof in science. It is called the proof by ranking. The proof by ranking, R-A-N-K-I-N-G. And it is illustrated here. Now, what do they do? Well, of course, tonight we're looking at human evolution or not, right? But again, it doesn't matter whether they're talking about elephants or anything, you know? What they do is, in this case, talking about humans, they will take the skulls of a human, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, a gibbon, and they make the most meticulous measurements you have ever seen in your life, as illustrated up here. They measure everything you possibly can. So they take a skull of a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human being, make these absolutely marvelous, meticulous measurements, measure them 6 times just to be sure they're right. But once they have done that, what do? They simply line them up by size and shape. This is called the proof by ranking. Ranking means to put things in a logical order, to line them up in a logical order, a logical sequence. That's what ranking is. And down below here, we have an illustrated example of ranking. And in the middle here, we have a key or a legend, whichever word you prefer, identifying what each of these skulls is supposed to represent. Now, there is a gorilla skull here, but it is not there as a part of the sequence. It's only there for comparison purposes. But let's take a look at the sequence A through F, and let's just see what we have here. Again, the dates are evolutionary dates, not real. However, skull A is Australopithecus, supposedly 500,000 to 1 million years old. Now, we are going to be using some big words tonight, like Australopithecus. I don't want you to be offended by big words, because actually they're very simple to understand if you just break them down, okay? For instance, what does this big old word Australopithecus, what does that big old word actually mean? Well, if you break it in two, austral is the ancient word for southern. Pithecus is the ancient word for ape. And so the big old word Australopithecus just means dead southern ape. Do you see how simple this is if you just break it down? Now, why are they called dead southern apes? It's really quite simple. When we found the skeletons, they were dead. Hello? But the first skeletons were found in Africa, but named by Europeans. Well, Africa is south of Europe, is that correct? So they were simply the bones of dead southern apes. See how simple this is, right? And I would like you to do something for me tomorrow. Would you please, go over to the neighbors next door that haven't been to the meetings or at school, at work, and so forth. And, if it's a neighbor, go over and knock on the door. When they open the door, say, "Did you know I'm Austral?" Well, you do live in the South, don't you? Now, let's just take a look. B here is Pithecanthropus erectus, supposedly 200 to 500,000 years old. Now, I don't agree with these dates. C here is Homo sapiens, supposedly 100 to 200,000 years old. D is Neanderthal, supposedly 50 to 100,000 years old. E is Homo sapien variety Neanderthaliensis, and is supposedly 50,000 years old. And F is modern Homo sapien. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned B, Pithecanthropus erectus. Do any of you remember in school being taught about this creature, Pithecanthropus? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just wondering, does anybody remember Pithecanthropus erectus? Well, what does it mean? Well, let's think about this. I just told you Pitha is the ancient name for ape, correct? Anthropos is the ancient name for man. Anthropology is the study of man, correct? And erectus means walks upright. Now, when you study your Bibles, and you all do study your Bibles, correct? Is Pastor here? I wanted him to hear the lack of enthusiasm there. Oh, yes. I heard about 3 voices. How about you? I said you do study your Bibles, right? Well, when you study your Bibles, you are actually studying about the life of the Theanthropos. Who is the Theanthropos? In Greek, theos means God. Theology is the study of God. Anthropos is the ancient word for man, right? And anthropology is the study of man. Well, think with me. Who is the theanthropos? He is the one who is 100% God and 100% man. That's Jesus Christ. He is the theanthropos. But this is the pithecanthropus erectus, meaning the ape man who walks upright. If you do not remember that big old name, please tell me, do any of you remember being taught in school about this creature using its nickname? The nickname for this creature is Java Man. Now, does anybody remember Java Man? See, now there's hands going up all over the place. Yeah, this is Java Man. But let's talk about Java Man for a minute. Java Man, originally called Pithecanthropus erectus, meaning the ape man who walks upright, is now called Homo erectus, or man that walks upright, but was made from a few teeth and one skull cap found in 1891 along the banks of the Solo River in Java, Indonesia. The pieces were found by the Dutch anatomist Dr. Eugene Dubois, M.D. But Dr. Dubois was a disciple of Dr. Ernst Haeckel, a German evolutionist. This man is so important. I have a DVD program out there on the table about Dr. Ernst Haeckel. You may never have heard his name, but you really need to know about this guy. He is arguably the third most important evolutionist of the 1800s, behind Charles Darwin and Thomas Huxley. But Huxley, he was the bulldog of Darwin, and Haeckel is in Germany. Darwin publishes his most famous book in the fall of 1859, an immediate bestseller, sold out, many editions would be published, and he would immediately be translated into various other European languages. When his book was actually translated into German, Dr. Haeckel got his book. Now, Dr. Haeckel was always an evolutionist, but once he read Darwin, he became a militant evolutionist. Big difference. Now, he was raised in a nominal Christian home, but he was never a Christian. He was always an evolutionist, and one of the few evolutionists of the 1800s who had an earned PhD. As a matter of fact, talking about Charles Darwin for just a moment, does anybody in this room know the only college degree that Charles Darwin ever earned? Okay, Pastor, cover your ears for just a second, okay? The only degree that Charles Darwin actually ever earned was a B.A. in Christian theology from Christ College, Cambridge, 1831. He was the son of a very successful medical doctor and the grandson of Erasmus Darwin, a prominent evolutionist. And Darwin learned much of his evolution from his grandfather Erasmus, though they never met. Erasmus died before Charles was born, but of course, being his grandfather, he read his grandfather's writings, correct? And Erasmus was a staunch evolutionist. His son, Robert, would continue to publish as well, and this convinced his grandson, Charles, to be an evolutionist. They wanted Charles to become a medical doctor, the third generation medical doctor, but there was a little problem with that. He hated the sight of blood. I don't know about you, I think it's tough being a medical doctor and hate the sight of blood. How about you? Hello? And so he left medical school, but the family was prominent, rather wealthy actually. Charles Darwin never worked a day in his life for pay. But nonetheless, well, they wanted to be a medical doctor because of the family tradition, but when he couldn't do that, he had to do something legitimate. So they sent him to Cambridge, Christ College, Cambridge, to become an English vicar. That's the preacher at an Anglican church of England, church. And his only earned degree after 4 years at the university was in Christian theology. Interesting? But he would then make a worldwide trip around the world in 5 years on the HMS Beagle, but he didn't go as the science officer. He went as the gentleman companion to Captain Fitzroy, the captain of the Beagle. Because in those days, the captain could not eat with the crew, and captains wanted to be able to have a conversation with somebody while they were having a meal. And so young English men would volunteer just for the adventure to go on these ships. He was supposed to go for 2 years, but it actually ended up going to 5. He wasn't supposed to sail around the world, but he did. And that's what got him to the Galapagos Islands. And from the Galapagos, he would develop many of his theories. But what happened when Dr. Ernst Haeckel read Darwin? He became militant, so militant that he would make up 3 very famous frauds, hoaxes, to promote the concepts of evolution to blue-collar German workers in the 1800s. Ladies and gentlemen, you may not believe this, but it is absolutely true. In the mid-1800s in Europe, scientists would actually rent halls, put up billboards, and charge people tickets to come hear them teach. Can you imagine? Hello? But he invented 3 great frauds. One of his great frauds was Pithecanthropus alalis. Now, Pithecanthropus, ape man, the word alalis means speechless. You see, the only difference that Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, Ernst Haeckel believed between apes and people was we could talk and they could not. Interestingly enough, Dr. Haeckel was actually a very good artist, a rarity with scientists, but he was a very good artist. However, he actually hired an artist to draw what the male, the female, and the baby of Pithecanthropus alalis looked like. Now remember, he's German. He knows his audience, right? It's very, very interesting. Now this is in the DVD there, but there's a picture. And what you have is the man standing upright with his back turned to you somewhat, and you can see his face. He has his arms up, and his body has about 3 times the hair of a gorilla. Okay? Right? I mean, just tremendous amounts of hair. And he's looking back at you, and he has a German handlebar mustache on his face. The woman is sitting, holding the baby with a very long, horse-like shaped face. You really can't tell much about the baby. You can just see the top of the head. But he went around Germany telling the Germans this was the creature that all Europeans had evolved from. To this day, there has never been one piece of evidence to support the drawings. He just made it up. He made up what's called the Monera, or Monoron, the first single-celled creature that supposedly evolved from rocks. Remember that if you believe in evolution, you believe that rocks become alive by random chance. I would like to ask all of you, when was the last time you saw a rock become alive by random chance? Not a chance. Good. Some of you were here last night. But he had very elaborate drawings that he did do himself of several species of these single-celled creatures, including one that showed the entire life cycle of the reproduction of the organism, and declared mono, meaning one cell, mono single, right? The Monera, the Monoron, that all life on Earth had evolved from. To this day, we have never found alive or in the fossil record anything that looks like his drawings. He just made them up. You see, this is the kind of man that Ernst Haeckel was. He had a disciple, Dr. Eugene Dubois, who was Dutch. Now, they both believed so strongly that humans evolved from apes that they believed that if Dr. Dubois would go to Java, Indonesia, he would find the missing link, the link between apes and humans. Now, talk about commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, try this one out. They believed this adamantly, and remember that in those days, Indonesia was a part of the Dutch Empire. It was the Dutch East Indies. He didn't even need a passport because it was part of the country. However, being a medical doctor, he actually volunteered to become a doctor in the Dutch army to get a free ticket to Indonesia. Come on, folks, that's commitment. Hello? Well, what happened? He arrived in December of 1887. I thought you might like to know about his archaeological team. Very impressive. His archaeological team consisted of 2 Dutch engineers, prison convict laborers, and 2 Dutch army corporals to watch the prisoners. Come on, folks, aren't you impressed with this archaeological team? Hello? 4 years later, in 1891, he would announce to the world that he had found the missing link. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember, he is in Indonesia, and it's 1891. He wants to tell his mentor, Dr. Ernst Haeckel, back in Germany, that he has found it. You know, Eureka, I found it, right? Now, I know, especially for the younger people here, I know that you're just not going to believe this, really. I know, but in 1891, they did not have cell phones. Hello? In Indonesia in 1891, they barely had a telephone. He has to send a telegram. Can anybody here remember telegrams? Hello? Yeah. So he sends a telegram, but remember, they charge per letter. And it's halfway around the world, so it's expensive. But he does send a short telegram back to Dr. Haeckel in Germany, telling him that he has, in fact, found the missing link. Dr. Haeckel would write back a telegram from the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer. I repeat, Dr. Haeckel wants to congratulate Dr. Dubois about this, writes a short telegram back, again cryptic because of the cost, and writes, from the inventor of Pithecanthropus to his happy discoverer. Hello? You see, Dr. Haeckel had already made up the name. He had simply sent Dubois out to find the pieces. Is that right? Oh. And in 1891, when Dr. Dubois announced that he had found the missing link, he forgot to tell folks a couple of little things. And interestingly enough, he forgot to tell them for 30 years. Does this sound familiar? But in 1921, not long before he passed away, Dr. Dubois admitted that what I'm about to share with you is absolutely true. You see, what he had actually found was a large ape-like skull cap. Today, we know it's a giant gibbon. He found 3 teeth, but only one was human. The other 2 teeth were from an orangutan. He did find a human thigh bone, but it was found 1 year later in 1892 and 50 feet away. This is the drawing showing 15 meters apart. Remember, he's European. He had simply put them together. He didn't even have the thigh bone at the time. He had a skull cap and 3 teeth, but announced to the world he'd found the missing link. He also forgot, however, to tell people a couple of things. That he had also found 2 totally normal human skulls at the same location 1 year earlier in 1890. He was so concerned that people would find out about these 2 totally normal human skulls found at the same location that he hid them under his bed. Hello? But in 1921, he finally admitted that this is absolutely correct information. Now, let's think about this for just a moment. Let's go back to this proof by ranking. Remember, the ability to put things in a logical order or a logical sequence, right? Here we have A, Australopithecus, dead southern ape, correct? But B never existed. It never existed. That's a hoax, is that correct? So it not to be here, is that correct? C is Homo sapien. Well, the last time I looked, that's us. And D is Neanderthal, but Neanderthals have always been classified as Homo sapiens, so that's just us. And E is Homo sapien variety neanderthaliensis, which of course is us. And F is modern Homo sapien, which is most assuredly us. So let's think what we've got here. 1 dead southern ape, something that never existed, and 4 people. How am I doing? Now, let's talk about this proof by ranking. I want to talk with you more about what it is, but just remember, it's their favorite method of proof, but it is the second worst method of proof in science. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am about to show you the pictures of a few skulls, and I want to make sure that I don't offend anybody, so I just want to prepare you for this. But I find what I'm about to show you scary, personally, I do. Not because I'm offended looking at skulls. I'm not offended. I don't think skulls are scary whatsoever. But let me show you why I do think this is scary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the photograph of a creature identified up here as Sinanthropus pekinensis, which is the technical name for China man from Peking, commonly referred to as Peking man. But Sinanthropus is China man, and Pekinensis, of course, the capital of China was Peking, although today it's Beijing, the same place, right? Now, this is part of a series of slides used in California. The reason I say I find this scary is look at the source. Los Angeles, California Unified School District, a series called Stones and Bones. This comes from a series of slides. I'm going to show you two of them, but it comes from an entire series of slides used to convince elementary school children in California they evolved from apes. That is what I find scary. Hello? Now, I mentioned this is the photograph of the skull of Peking man. Does anybody here have a problem with me showing you this skull? Nobody has a problem? That's interesting. The truth of the matter is, you should stand up and stone me. That is not the photograph of the skull of Peking man. That is the photograph of the model of the skull of Peking man. Did you hear me? Let me tell you about Peking man. After World War I was over, evolutionary believing scientists, anthropologists, went to Peking at those days, the capital of China, got the approval, went outside of the capital, set up a base camp in 1923, and started digging. The work would actually continue until 1937, but was stopped in 1937 because the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and everybody knew they were going to go right straight into China. Is that correct? And so the work would proceed from 1923 to 1937. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. This is actually not the original pieces. This is a museum reproduction of the pieces that were found. Please tell me, and look at this. Does this look like that? Excuse me? Oh, this is just the photograph of the model made by a human being of what that they think looked like. What I'm trying to get you to be aware of is this: be wary of artist renderings. Remember, you can draw anything you want. And simply because somebody draws it doesn't make it real. Is that correct? I would remind you that you see all the time in magazines, newspapers, TV, you will see pictures, oh, we just found this new star with planets going around it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have no problem with the fact that there are stars that have planets orbiting them, like our solar system. There's no life on them, but I don't have any problem with those planets existing, and for good scientific reasons. But then they show you a picture of what the planet looks like, or what the star looks like if you were standing on the planet. And it looks real. But if you look right underneath it, it says artist rendering. Why? Because we've never seen the planets. We've never seen them. Now, we can scientifically determine they exist for good reasons, but we've never taken a picture of them. We don't know what they look like at all. Hello? Now, with that in mind, I also want to introduce you. Do you remember I mentioned that Pithecanthropus erectus had been reclassified as Homo erectus, right? I mentioned that, meaning man who walks upright. Ladies and gentlemen, Homo erectus is a file 13. It is a circular filing cabinet. It is a garbage bin for evolutionary believing anthropologists. Every time they find something they think has anything to do with human evolution, but they cannot identify it specifically, they throw it into the Homo erectus, this garbage can, this circular filing cabinet. I just want you to understand that, okay? Now, again, let's talk about Peking man. Remember Davidson Black? I mentioned he was involved with the finding of Piltdown Man in England in 1912. Is that correct? I told you should remember these names. Now, Dr. Black is the man who actually gave the name to this creature, Peking man. But the pieces were found between 1923 and 1937. The work stopped because of the invasion of China by Japan. Now, in 1937, the work was stopped. But his fellow evolutionary anthropologists from around the world appealed to Dr. Black, oh, you cannot allow these precious fragments to fall into the hands of the advancing Japanese army. You must allow them to be shipped out of China for safekeeping during World War II. And finally, in 1941, the pieces were photographed, cast, packed up in crates, shipped out of China, and promptly lost. The original pieces have never been seen again. What you have seen are just models, but they are not the original pieces because they were lost in 1941 and have never been found again. However, I would remind you that Peking man has recently been found to be reclassified as Homo erectus. Remember the garbage can? And in 1926, 3 years after the work began, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, and Dr. Davidson Black visited the location in China, and Dr. Black would give it the name. It is now commonly believed that both men involved with both the finding of Piltdown Man and Peking Man salted the locations. Hello?
Yes.
Oh. Remember that Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Jesuit priest, was a Catholic, Roman Catholic priest, but he adamantly believed in evolution to the point that the Pope commanded him not to write. He would not allow him to publish because of his evolutionary views. Back in those days, the Pope actually thought people might actually have been created. Hello? Well, here's another skull. Now, this is a Neanderthal, but it has a French name because this is a Neanderthal found in France. Now, initially they were found in Germany, but more have been found in France. I would like to point out for those of you that might be interested in a little history, the word Neanderthal, that's German. Tal in German means valley, and Neanderthal means the valley of a man whose last name was Neander. His name was Joachim Neander. You might be interested. He was a writer of Christian hymns. Now, let's talk about Neanderthals. You know, Neanderthals are the ones that most people think of when you think of the term caveman. This is the one that most people think of when you use the term caveman. I would also like to add cave women. Come on, folks, no cave women, no cavemen. Hello? Now, they were first found in 1856 in caves found in the Neander Valley of Germany. Today, we have found somewhat over 400 remains, not entire skeletons of all of them, but bits and pieces of at least slightly over 400 individuals, okay? Now, I cannot at this time get a better map than what I'm going to show you. This is the most current map I can get. I will correct it for you, one thing that you will not see. But this map shows you where Neanderthal remains have been found. They were first found in Germany, but more in France. They've been found in Spain, Portugal, northern Italy. They have been found in Israel. We have found Neanderthal remains at the foot of Mount Hermon near Tel Dan in Israel. But more recently, they have been found east of the Black Sea, more recently east of the Caspian Sea, more recently into central Siberia. However, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please look at the map carefully, and those of you that can see it, do you see right over here on the right edge a thing that kind of looks like a banana? That is Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is right here. Lake Baikal is the largest alpine lake in the world. It has more water in it than all the lakes of the world put together. And it is beautiful. As a matter of fact, just last November, I was actually out that way, speaking and teaching, but I've been many times in this area. And just 2 years ago, I was in the Russian city of Chita. Chita is just east of the Baikal here, and that is where the most recent remains of Neanderthals have been found. So now we know that Neanderthals range all the way from the Atlantic, all the way across Siberia, almost to the Pacific. And they were 100% human. Let me explain. First of all, we now know they had a brain that averaged 13% larger than ours today. I think it's a little hard to suggest they were pre-human if their brain was 13% larger than ours. How about you? And we have collected DNA from Neanderthals, and guess what? They are 100% human. The DNA of Neanderthals matches 99.7 to 100% identical to modern humans, which is less difference than the modern range of humans today. People do not have the exact same amount of DNA. Do you realize that your DNA can vary by as much as 10%? 100% in the genes, and you're still totally normally human. So people don't even have the same amount of genetic information to begin with. And this variation is less than the variation in humans today. I would also like to point out to you that Neanderthals are biblical. If you happen to have your Bibles tonight, please turn to Genesis chapter 10, verse 3. Genesis chapter 10 is referred to as the Table of Nations. It lists the 70 nations created at the Tower of Babel experience when God divided the human population into 70 individual groups by languages. Remember, nobody spoke more than one language, and so God separated them into 70 groups. This is why we have the different ethnic appearances we see today. If you're more interested, we have a DVD on that as well. But take a look at Genesis 10:3. As you start to read there, do you see a name, Ashkenaz? Ashkenaz is the ancient name for Germany. And today, when Jews from, Northern Europe make Aliyah, the return to the land of Israel, they are today referred to as the Ashkenazi. In Europe, there are two great branches of Judaism. There's the Sephardic Jews, which came from Spain, though they were sent out in 1492, and the northern Jews, which are called the Ashkenazi or Ashkenazi Judaism. And so this is just the ancient word for Neanderthals. And what happened? They came from the Tower of Babel, migrating to north central Europe. Remember that we've only found a little over 400 individuals together. We found tools and all sorts of things, and they were 100% human. They had language, art, music. They were tool users. They made jewelry. They were religious. They buried their dead in religious graves. You have been taught that they were hunter-gatherers. That's true. However, 2 years ago, it was proven that they also farmed. They were not just hunter-gatherers. They were whole human beings who also farmed for a living, and they were 100% human. And I would like you to think about this. Living in a cave in Northern Europe is actually a very intelligent thing to do. Remember that when they came from the Tower of Babel, they didn't have much. They had to learn how to live in a new environment, correct? And living in a cave in Northern Europe is a very intelligent thing to do. I think you would agree. They're warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and they are incredibly cheap to build. Hello? And of course, the next question I generally get is, are cavemen and cave women mentioned in the Bible? Let me ask all of you this question. Please tell me, if God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric? Okay, I'm going to try that one more time. I said if God starts the Bible on day 1, week 1, month 1, year 1, is there any such thing as prehistoric? Not a chance. Thank you very much. There is no such thing as prehistoric. Everything is historic. You see, the word prehistoric was invented by evolutionists, but technically it is a non-word because it has no specific definition. Because there is no such thing as prehistoric. Everything is historic. And if you will simply open your Bibles and start reading, you will actually find that there are 31 references to men and women living in caves. I will show you a few to get you started. You can find the rest for yourself. My first example, what about Lot and his daughters in Genesis 19, verse 30? Or how about the 5 Amorite kings in Joshua 10? Or the children of Israel themselves in Judges 6. Samson. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Samson was a judge of Israel equivalent to a king that would come later. Is that correct? But Samson lived in a cave mentioned in Judges 15. So doesn't that qualify Samson as a caveman? Oh. And what about the prophet Elijah, the great prophet Elijah? He lived in a cave. That's recorded for us in 1 Kings 19. And ladies and gentlemen, we even think we know the cave that Elijah lived in, although I openly admit to you there was no brass plaque there when we found it, okay? But we actually think we know the cave that he lived in. Or how about Obadiah's 100 prophets, 1 Kings 18? Or the men of Israel again at Michmash in 1 Samuel 13. And ladies and gentlemen, do I not seem to remember that King David lived in a cave at Adullam, recorded in 1 Samuel 22 and 24. And therefore, doesn't that qualify King David as a caveman? Thank you very much. But there are 13 references to men and women living in caves recorded in the Old and in the New Testament. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I find this very, very interesting personally. I would like to share you a vision that I once had. Now, I mentioned that people lived in caves also recorded in the New Testament. How many of you remember the story of the man named Saul who became the Apostle Paul, who would meet the Lord on the road to Damascus? Is that correct? And he would be struck blind. He would go to Damascus. He would receive his sight. It would be restored to him. Then he went back to Jerusalem briefly. Tell me, what was the next thing he did? After he went back to Jerusalem and left, where did he go? Thank you, sir. He spent 3 years in the Arabian desert being taught only by the Holy Spirit. Is that correct? Where do you think he lived in the Arabian desert? In a cave. Israel, I can take you to the ancient monasteries at Marsaba and others. Hermits lived in caves for not just hundreds of years, but even today, temporarily. But they have lived, hermits, in those caves in the desert, the wilderness of Israel, the Arabian Peninsula, for millennia. And so here's sort of the thing. What I find interesting about the Apostle Paul, I love the guy. When he writes about the initiation of the communion, he writes about it as if he had been there. He writes about it in a first-person way of describing it. Had you ever noticed that? And I find that fascinating because, of course, we know he was a persecutor of the church at that time, correct? And he most certainly was not there and watched Jesus initiate the communion. Is that right? But he writes about it as if he had been, correct? Now, I have this vision. I think that what happened was this. Paul found a nice, comfortable cave. Then the Holy Spirit brought in a 55-inch flat-screen TV and played 3 years of the DVDs of the life of Jesus. Hello? I mean, it's the way he describes it, isn't it? You know? Well, again, this is the skull of a Neanderthal. Neanderthals are known predominantly by the very heavy eyebrow ridges. That's one of the indicators of a Neanderthal skeleton. Now, Neanderthal skeletons are referred to in anthropology as robust. Robust. It means that they're strong, very powerful. They had the strength of a gorilla, but the intelligence greater than we do today. They were stocky. The men only averaged 5'7", the women 5'3", but they're very intelligent and incredibly strong, and their skeletons are heavy-boned people. And that's called robust. Now, if you find skeletons where the bones are thin, they're called gracile. But Neanderthals are robust, okay? And they have these heavy eyebrow ridges. And evolutionists want you to say, well, that's because they evolved from apes. Is that correct? I mean, that's the concept they want you to believe, correct? But ladies and gentlemen, we now know today the reason that they had these heavy eyebrow ridges is simply because it indicates humans who lived strenuous lives inland, in caves, but suffered from thyroid problems caused by an iodine deficiency. They were so far inland they didn't get fish and they didn't get the iodine. And that's what this is all about. It has nothing to do with evolving from a gorilla. Hello? And let's talk about this proof by ranking. I said again, it is the second worst method of proof in science, but is the one that they use the most. Remember that if you believe in evolution, you believe that butterflies and tomatoes are related. Hello? Yeah, if you believe in evolution, you believe butterflies and tomatoes are related. I always like to throw that out to try to grab your imagination, you know? But let's take a look at this proof by ranking, and I'm going to show you how even a child can destroy the argument that evolutionists use, their favorite method of argument. Now, the proof by ranking means to put things in a logical order or a logical sequence, correct? So, please do not stand up, but I'm simply saying, what if I asked you to stand up, okay? Don't. But what if I were to ask you to stand up, and I were to bring everybody down front here, and I were to put you in a logical sequence, a logical order by your height only, all right? So what I'm going to do is, I'll start with, the babies and the younger children, the shortest, say, over here. and then the tallest over here on this end with me. And once I put everybody in the room in a sequence using only your height, okay, what two things would I have proven scientifically? I'll take them in either order, but please tell me, what two things would I have proven scientifically? Okay, several people have given a correct answer, but they have not used scientific language. So I'm going to ask you, you're right, please don't misunderstand, but may I have permission to put it in a more scientific terminology? Thank you. So what these folks have just said is, people come in different heights, right? So I have just proven scientifically people come in different heights. What is the second and only other thing I have proven scientifically? No, I just proved that some are taller than others, but people come in different heights. From the short to the tall, from pygmies to Watusis, whatever you want to pick. But what's the other thing that I proved scientifically? If you don't understand, what I just proved scientifically is I have the intelligence to do it. Hello? I have just proven people come in different heights, and I have the intelligence to put things in a logical order or sequence. That's the only two things I have just proven. Now, let's do this again, this proof by ranking. And what if I were to ask all of you to stand up? So we're using exactly the same people, right? I'm going to bring you down here a second time, but this time I'm going to change the rule. This time I'm not going to put you in a logical order or sequence by your height. This time I'm going to do it by the month and the day of the month you were born. Not the year. This has nothing to do with your age. I don't care what year you were born. I am simply going to use the month and the day of the month that you were born. So I bring everybody down here. I will start over there with January, over here to December. I will go back and arrange you 1 through 31 for the day of the month. Once I have everybody in this room in a line going from January the 1st to December the 31st, in a crowd of this size, as a consequence of doing it, I would prove that at least two of you have the same birthday. But that's just a consequence of doing it. But now, tell me, what two things would I have scientifically proven? What was that now? Well, that's half the answer, sir. I have just proved that people are born on different days of the year. Correct? I know that's kind of what you meant. I just wanted to use more scientific terminology. So I have just proven that people are born on different days of the year. What is the second and only other thing I've proven? That I have the intelligence to do it. That was kind of a gimme, okay? But please tell me, putting you in a logical order by your height only, or by the month and day of your birth only, please tell me, did I prove that any of you are married to each other? I didn't prove that any of you are husband and wives. Is that right? Please tell me, did I prove that any of you are father and son, mother and daughter, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, or cousins? No. Think with me. Putting things in a logical order or sequence proves absolutely nothing about your heritage. Hello? Think with me for just a moment. I do believe that occasionally a deer might die in this area. Just a thought. Now, think with me. If I walk out into the woods and find the skeleton of a dead deer, which of course died from old age. Now, if there are enough bones left, I can maybe determine how old it was at the time it died. I might be able to tell whether it was a male or female if the right bones are still there, right? But please tell me, if I find the skeleton of that deer, can I prove it even had offspring? Can I prove it had babies? Hello? No, I can't even prove it reproduced. Is that correct? I want to make sure these people never, ever deceive you again. Hello? Think with me about this proof by ranking. What if I were to take a unicycle, put it next to a bicycle, next to a motorcycle, next to an automobile, next to a Hummer? Would I have just proved that Hummers evolved from unicycles? But that's a logical order or sequence, is it not? And I want to make sure these people never deceive you again. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when an evolutionist says, here's the skull of a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human, and they say to you, you see how one evolved from the other. Let's think about that for just a moment, okay? How many of you have seen modern special effects, TV, movies, and so forth? Come on, mutants, hello. Every one of you should be raising your hand. You know, mutants things and all of these kinds. And you have seen on the screen a person become an animal become a person, one person become a different person, and today on the screen it looks real. You know it's fiction. But the modern special effects technology today is so good, it looks real and you can buy into it for the purposes of the story, correct? I mean, this is no longer 1936 claymation, correct? Today it just looks so good, right? Now, think with me. When an evolutionist says, here's the skull of a gibbon, a chimpanzee, an orangutan, a gorilla, and a human being, and they say to you, you see how one evolved from the other, the answer would be yes. Yes, I do, if you fill in the blanks in between with your own imagination. Hello? If you make a special effects movie in your brain, if you fill in the gaps with your own imagination, you can see it. Is that correct? But what is the correct answer? The correct answer is no. I see 5 objects lined up by size and shape, but that proves nothing that one came from the other. Hello? Don't ever let them deceive you again. I have, by the way, I have a proposition. I'm not a betting man, okay? I don't bet. So do you understand when I say a proposition here? I have a proposition for you, ladies and gentlemen. You give me one real skull of 1,000 different real animals. So you give me the skull of a dog, the skull of a cow, the skull of a horse, okay? Give me one skull each of 1,000 different real animals, right? Using this method of proof, I will prove to you that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into whales. Hello? Or I will pick and choose from those skulls, and I will prove to you that apes did not evolve into people. What really happened was apes evolved into elephants. Hello? You let me pick the skulls, put them in a sequence, I will make you think that's what happened. Is that correct? But it's pretty absurd when you think about it. Is that right? And this is the second worst method of proof in science. It proves absolutely nothing. Are you with me? And then, of course, I'm Dr. Grady. I only ask the really good questions, folks. Hello? Here's my next question. Which proof by ranking are we supposed to believe is the correct one? Did you hear that? Which proof by ranking are we supposed to believe is the correct one? I have an entire filing cabinet full of different ones because different evolutionists think it's a different sequence. Let me illustrate it for you. Here is one. Now, this comes from the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Remember that Mr. Smithson, an Englishman, left the money to start it, but he was an absolute believer in evolution. And everything at the Smithsonian is evolutionary. When I went to high school in Washington, D.C., I used to go to the Smithsonian and saturate myself, particularly in the Natural History Museum, soaking myself in evolution at the Smithsonian when I was in high school. I told you I was an evolutionist, but I was also a diligent seeker of truth. I have always been a diligent, earnest seeker of truth since I was born, which is a bold statement. I think you'll agree. I talked about how I grew up at Berkeley, of course. But ladies and gentlemen, when I went to high school, I used to do my high school homework at the Library of Congress. Come on, folks, it had a lot better library than my high school did. Hello? You get the idea? I'm serious. However, this comes from the Smithsonian website, and what do we see here? I'll describe only a few things. Once you understand what's on the screen, you will be able to debunk the whole thing for yourself, okay? So what do we have here? Well, here, this is the present on the right-hand side, and supposedly this is going back in 1 million year increments. So we go back 1, 2, 3 million years. This is evolutionary, right? Inside this time frame, we see these solid bars of different colors, correct? Now, next to each bar, there is a name. Somebody yesterday or the day before talked about, what about Lucy? Well, Lucy is Australopithecus afarensis. That's Lucy right there, Australopithecus afarensis. Now, that name tells you that bar represents Lucy, but Lucy supposedly, according to evolutionists, lived from 3 million to 4 million years ago. So the bar represents the time that evolutionists believe each individual creature named existed. Everybody with me so far? All right. Now, so we have the million of year increments. We have the different bars, each bar supposedly representing something in the pre-human line, and each one identified by name. At this point, you now know everything you need to know to completely and totally debunk the entire thing. And I am serious. I don't care where you start either. But since I happen to be up here, please notice the solid bars. Did you notice the dotted lines connecting them? Now, ladies and gentlemen, why do we use dotted lines to connect things? It is to show a relationship that we think might be true but cannot prove it's true. Think with me. If we could prove it was true, the two solid lines would touch each other. Is that correct? Do you see any two solid lines touching each other? They're all connected with dotted lines. Is that correct? An attempt to show a relationship that we think might be true but we cannot prove is true. Is that correct? Also, did you happen to notice the question marks? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 question marks. Boy, that really puts, a zap in it, doesn't it, for you? I mean, doesn't that just make you feel good about this? Come on, folks, 5 question marks. Hello? Also, did you happen to notice these two back here? There are no dotted lines connecting them to these up here. Is that correct? Also, would you please look at these 3 here? Notice that there is a question mark, dotted lines, and there are 3 different ones here, correct? But notice that there are no dotted lines connecting them to humans, which are over here. Is that correct? So there's no dotted lines connecting these 2 to any of it, and these 3, well, there's no dotted lines connecting them to humans. Ladies and gentlemen, in one word, please tell me why those 5 are even here. Because clearly, even the evolutionists show they don't belong there. Is that correct? So what one word would describe adequately why these 5 are on this chart? Well, I understand what you mean when you say hoax. I do. But that's not the correct word, but I do understand what you mean. Please understand. No, ladies and gentlemen, would you all repeat one word after me? Would you please repeat the word filler? Come on, say that loud, say that proud. Filler. Why are the 5 there? Because they needed filler. Because if you take these 5 away, it appears there's less evidence to support human evolution. Is that correct? And they're simply there to deceive you into believing that there is more evidence than they actually have. This is referred to as stage magic. It's not black magic, but it is stage magic. It is illusion. Are you with me? It is to trick your eye into believing that there is more evidence for human evolution than they actually have. I would also like to point out to you something. Ladies and gentlemen, never say, I am not up to date. October 2013, evolutionists realized that all 5 of these were the one species, that they were simply 5 different individuals of the same kind, and today called Homo erectus. Hello? Think with me. In one day, they lost 4 intermediates, supposedly between apes and people. How y'all doing? Is this rich or is it not? But I said, which proof by ranking are we supposed to believe? Let me show you. Again, I have a whole collection of these. I'm just going to show you a couple here. This is another one. I have to explain. This one was done up and down, and it is so tall, I had to cut it in half and put it side by side that you could actually see what's on it. Because if I simply put it on the screen in one piece, it's so small you can't see it, okay? But this is the present. This is today. Then it goes back in time increments going back, and then this connects to there. Can everybody kind of see? These four are those four, correct? And then it continues on back 6 million years, okay? So again, it goes from the present supposedly back 6 million years. But we go down here, and then down again, right? Again, you know everything you need to know to completely and totally debunk the whole thing. First of all, you will notice that these solid bars, which again have the names next to each other, again, this is Lucy right here. That's Australopithecus afarensis, but this is Lucy. So each one, again, is identified as you saw before. But you will notice that no two solid bars touch each other. Is that correct? They are all connected with dotted lines. Is that right? But I wonder if you would also count with me the number of question marks. Let's start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 question marks on this. Doesn't that strike confidence in you? Come on, folks, that really strikes confidence, doesn't it? And ladies and gentlemen, I would point out these four, this one and these three. That's these four over here, these four right there. Notice that there are no dotted lines connecting them to humans. Is that correct? So why are those four there? What was that? Say it loud, say it proud. Filler. But clearly they do not belong there. Is that correct? But ladies and gentlemen, I wondered if you noticed one other thing. Did you happen to notice there is no dotted line connecting these three to any of the rest of these? Hello? There is no dotted line connecting these to any of those. According to these evolutionists, they're not even sure if humans were connected to those at all. Is that correct? I would also remind you that in October of 2013, these five were reclassified as one, as Homo erectus, the garbage can. Hello? Well, let's take a look at one more. This comes from my beloved University of California, Berkeley, where I grew up as a child. And again, the present is on the right-hand side, and it goes back in million-year increments, 6 million years, right? And here we see solid bars, again, each one with its name. This is Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, right here. However, did you notice that the evolutionary anthropologists at Berkeley were so honest, they didn't even put in dotted lines? Hello? Oh, also, did you happen to notice right back here, it says, at 6 million years ago, chimpanzees evolved that way and have nothing to do with human evolution. Did you happen to notice that? And again, never say that I am not up to date. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know, June 13, 2011, Science magazine, which is the second highest scientific journal in the world for evolutionists, second behind Nature, declared that actually chimpanzees did not separate from the human lineage 6 million years ago, but instead it was 13 million years ago. In one day, they moved the separation of chimpanzees from the human line back 7 million years in one day. Again, I would remind you, these have all been reclassified as one also. How are you doing? Is this stuff kind of a little bit interesting? Well, I'm going to stop looking at those, and we're going to start to begin to initiate, to move in the direction of ending. But I want to show you this right here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the front cover of Time magazine, October the 9th of 2006. You don't believe me? You can look it up for yourself, I assure you. I was walking down a hallway in an airport, saw this magazine for sale in a magazine rack. I was simply walking. I would never pick this thing up. Remember that Time magazine is the second biggest popularizer of evolution in the world, second only to National Geographic. I would never pick it up. But I'm walking down the hall. I saw this cover in the rack, and I stopped. I stopped cold. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that cannot see it, first of all, remember that Time magazine only teaches evolution. They are always teaching that people evolved from apes and that other things evolved from other things. Now, on the cover, it shows a human baby and a young chimpanzee. On the cover, it says, "How we became human." Those of you, I'm sure most can read it, correct? What you may not be able to read is the white print underneath. So I'm going to copy this for you over here. So what it says below, "How we became human," below it says, "Chimps and humans share almost 99% of their DNA. New discoveries reveal how we can be so alike and yet so different." And it's right on the cover, correct? Now, when I saw that cover, I stopped dead cold, and I got angry. I mean, I got seriously angry, and you have never seen me angry, and you don't want to. But I got righteously angry. Would you agree? We can be righteously angry and sin not. Is that correct? And I saw the cover of this Time magazine, and I got righteously angry because I knew already in those days it was a bold-faced lie. Hello? Now, I went out and I did the research. Today, I have 65 slides with almost 100 scientific reasons that this is a bold-faced lie. Relax, we're not going to look at all of them tonight. Hello? But what I have done is I have condensed it down into simple, easy bullet points on just 4 slides. But what is the truth? Evolutionists teach here. Notice this is October of 2006, correct? And here they're saying that we share almost 99% of the same DNA with chimpanzees, correct? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am not asking if you believe this. I'm only going to ask, how many of you have heard this? Radio, TV, school? Yeah, but it's a bold-faced lie, and I want you to know how to refute it. So let's just take a look. Do apes and people share 96 to 99% of the same DNA? Please notice that I do have the citations at the bottom. Point number 1, similarity may come from a common ancestor. That's evolution. People have a skeleton, a biological body that certainly we would agree is similar with apes. There's no doubt about that. You know, 1 pair of lungs, 1 heart, the mouth's in the same place. But similarity can come from a common ancestor, which would be the concept of evolution. But similarity can also come from a common designer, creator, God. Is that correct? Who had one really good design but used it for many different purposes. This is a common engineering thing. In engineering universities, we teach this all the time. You come up with one really good idea and then you modify it to do many different things. And think about the universal nature of the pendactyl pattern. The pendactyl pattern of 5 digits is universal in biology. And do you realize the same bones that exist in your hand or your foot, they're the same bones, they're just in different locations, but they're the same identical bones, are the same bones in the wing of a bird, the wing of a bat, the flipper of a whale, the leg of a horse. It is exactly the same bones. They're just different sizes and lengths. But they're exactly the same bones. This shows an intelligent creator, designer, engineer who took one really good design and then modified it for different purposes. Now, philosophically, at this point, these are equal. You either came from a common ancestor, that's evolution, or you came from a common designer, creator, God. So philosophically, at this point, they're equal in weight. We want to see which one is true, okay? Point number 2. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, while gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and orangutans have 24 pairs of chromosomes. Ladies and gentlemen, apes have 1 more pair of chromosomes than you and I do. But please tell me, does that make them better than us? No. Hello? Oh. Point number 3. I think you'll pay special attention to this one. Point number 3. The Y chromosome. Now, the Y chromosome is what makes a boy a boy. That makes it really easy in the English language. By the way, when I find something that I'm going to tell you about that I think is particularly important to ladies or men. I always try to point that out. Now, ladies, did I try to help you last night? Come on, the bling, hello, right? But tonight I'd like to talk to the men. This is for the men. Gentlemen, remember that genetically, men have one X and one Y chromosome for gender. Women have two X chromosomes for gender, okay? Now, men, this is why women are a doubly unknown quantity to men. Come on, folks, X is an unknown quantity, and they got two. I am quoting from Nature magazine. Nature magazine, the single biggest scientific journal in the world for evolutionists. The Y chromosomes of men and apes are, and I quote, horrendously different from each other. The difference is over 58%. Ladies, you are 69% the same for gender genes as female chimps, but you are 31% different. Are you with me? So men are more than 58% different, and women are slightly more than 31% different for the gender genes. For example, men have 60 genes for gender, but chimpanzee males only have 25. Now, in 2 weeks, I will be going to England for mission work. I love going to England, I really do. I just love it. I've been there many times because they actually speak English. You know, we don't speak English, we speak American, you know. But the English have this great expression. I just love this expression. You see, the English say, let's do the maths. Yeah, let's do the maths. Let's do the mathematics. Let's do the arithmetic. Please tell me, if male gender genes are more than 58% different, if women are 31% different, so forth, please tell me, how can we only be 1% different from chimpanzees? Hello? Let's do the maths. Chimpanzee genome is 11.5% larger than the human genome. We have basically 3 billion base pairs. They have 3.35 billion. That means that their genome is 11.5% bigger than ours, but please tell me, does that make them better than us? No, I would agree with you. And think about this. The total difference here would be 4.5%. Is that correct? That's the maths. So please tell me, how can we only be 1% different if we know that we're 4.5% different? Hello? Page 2. Point number 5. In the year 2005, this number of 99% similar. Well, it turns out that what they did was they cherry-picked 2.7% of the entire human DNA. They didn't even know all the chimpanzee DNA at that time, but they cherry-picked it, only 2.7%, compared it, and then declared that we were 99% the same. But we didn't even know all the chimpanzee genome at that time. And remember, the Human Genome Project had only been completed a few years earlier. Now, that means they left out 97.3% of the genetic information in their comparison. Is that correct? Please tell me what rational human being would leave out 97.3% of the information available when making a decision. We all decide things on less than 100% information. But what rational human being would make a decision leaving out 97.3% of the available information? Remember that evolution is irrational, unreasonable, illogical, and unscientific. Hello? Point number 6. In the year 2000, this is prior to the Human Genome Project being completed, this is with imperfect information. They already knew that it was not 99. And again, this comes from very good sources. They already knew it was only 95.2 in 2002. So please tell me how in 2006 Time Magazine could publish 99. Could it be that Time Magazine didn't care, didn't do the research, simply had an agenda? Is that possible? Oh. And I would point out to you, all life on Earth shares 25% the same DNA. When you compare organisms, you don't start at zero. All life on Earth, I do not care whether you are a bacteria, a plant, an animal, or a human being, you share 25% the same DNA with all life forms on Earth because there are just some things that are necessary for life. Hello? Now, with that in mind, remember that genetic similarity does not produce spiritual equivalency. Is that correct? Okay. Page 3. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Dr. Jerry Bergman. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have 2 doctorates, but Dr. Jerry Bergman has 2 earned PhDs, but he has a total of 10 earned degrees. He's working on another one at the moment. I don't know about you, but that impresses me. How about you? But he is one of us. Hello? He's a Christian. He's a young earth creationist. Hello? But he's an impressive guy, I think you've got to admit. Now, his degrees, his doctorates are in biology and microbiology. He went out and looked at the 2 largest catalogs of known mutations recorded on Earth. Now, remember that according to evolutionists, evolution has to be random. There can be no outside designer, creator, God. Everything has to be by random chance. And evolutionists believe that the only thing in nature that by random chance occurs to produce evolution is mutation of the genetic information. But let me define the word mutation for you for just a moment. The word mutation means scientifically copying error. Copying error. It is a mistake in copying the previously existing information. Mutations always lose, corrupt, degrade the previously existing information. Genetics goes in the wrong direction. The laws of genetics are not creative. They are conservative. They conserve information, but they never generate new information. And every time you have information passed on, it degrades. I can disprove evolution right here, right now. I'll show you. For example, I'll go over to this young man right here. This guy, he is a stalwart, upright member of the community, never told a lie in his entire life. Don't say a word. Now, he's never told a lie in his entire life, okay? And I'm going to tell him a story for 5 minutes, which nobody else in the room can hear. I will now ask him to repeat the story verbatim, word for word, exactly as I told it to you to her. I will now ask you to tell him, then her, then her, then her, then her, her, and finally, when I ask this young lady right here to tell me the story that I told him, how many of you will agree I won't even recognize the country it occurred in?
Right.
What happened to the story? Mutations, copying errors. And that's what happens in genetics. But Dr. Bergman went out. He looked at the 2 largest catalogs of known mutations in bacteria, plants, animals, and people. He found nearly 500,000 documented specific known mutations. He then looked at them. He found 186 which were not detrimental. They were not beneficial, but they were not detrimental, okay? We used to call them neutral mutations. Today they're called functional mutations. But there is no change that affects anything, okay? 186. Now, that means that 99.96% of all mutations are harmful or lethal. Most of them are lethal. But sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, it's those kinds of things. You can live. But most mutations are actually lethal. Remember that chimpanzees and human beings only share 29% of the same proteins. 71% of our proteins are not identical. So if 71% of our proteins are not identical, let's do the maths. How can we be only 1% difference? Number 10, considering the whole genome in 2003, the number of comparison between chimpanzees and humans was down to 86.7. Please notice this comes from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, USA. That is the highest scientific authority in the United States. 97% of the scientists are evolutionists. But we knew in 2003 that the comparison between apes and humans was already down to 86.7%. But ladies and gentlemen, in 2006, Time magazine said it was almost 99. Is that right? Yep. So please tell me, maybe they didn't do the research. Maybe they didn't want to do the research. Maybe they didn't want to know the truth. Maybe they just had an agenda. Could that possibly be the case? Page 4 and the last one. Remember I said if you would stay for the last 10 minutes, you would go out of here, thank me, shaking my hand. Page 4, considering the whole genomes of apes and humans, which was known in September of 2005, the comparison was down to 80.6. Did you notice the more we learn, the more difference we find? Is that correct? Oh, to bring you up to date, in the fall of 2013, so we're talking basically 4 years ago, we now know the number is 70. This will not change. Ladies and gentlemen, we know both genomes completely. We can compare them directly. This number is not going to change in the future. Humans only share 70% of the DNA with chimpanzees, but remember that all life on Earth shares 25. Hello? Okay. Now, with that in mind, 70% means that we have 900 million base pair differences between apes and people. That's a lot. Hello? Now, again, I said that you would really enjoy this, and you're about to really enjoy this. Ladies and gentlemen, using this absurd method of comparison, the one that evolutionists want to use, looking at the DNA, using this absurd method of proof, I want you to know before you go home tonight that you are also 50% the same as a banana. I don't know about you, I find that appealing. Now, you're only 70% the same as a chimpanzee, but you're 50% the same as a banana. The last time I looked, a banana is a plant. Hello? But genetically, you are 50% the same as a banana. I also want you to know before you go home tonight that you are also 35% the same genetically as a daffodil, or if you prefer narcissus, it's the same plant. Now, I do think that that's biblical, if you think about it, because we are supposed to bloom where we're planted, correct? Hello? But you're 50% the same as a banana, 35% the same as a daffodil, both of which are plants, correct? But I also want you to know that before you leave here tonight, you are, using this absurd method of comparison, you are 88% the same as a rat. Genetically, you are 88% the same as a rat, but you're only 70% the same as a chimpanzee. Hello? But at least rats are mammals. Hello? Right? At least it's a mammal, right? Now, again, I want you to know before you leave here tonight that you are, according to this absurd method of comparison, you are also 60% the same as a chicken. Which does make you wonder whether the gospel bird, when you eat it, is cannibalism, doesn't it? Hello? Now let's think. A rat is a mammal, a chicken is a bird, and a banana is a plant. Is that correct? I've got that, right? Oh. Well, I also want you to know before you leave here tonight that using this method of comparison, genetically you are 70% the same as a sea sponge. Which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I find this very interesting. You are 70% genetically the same as a sea sponge, which does make me wonder. Maybe it is actually true. Maybe we really are related. It does beg the question, doesn't it? And remember, you're 70% the same as a chimpanzee, and you're 70% the same as a sea sponge. Is that correct? But I am not finished. I have one more for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want you to know before you leave here tonight that you are 88% the same genetically as a sea squirt. Apparently, you don't know what a sea squirt is. Is that right? Well, let me show you what a sea squirt looks like. This is the photo of a sea squirt. Now, I want the young people here. Even the youngest back there, I want you to pay special attention. Now, you pay special attention now, okay? And over here, you're going to love what I'm about to share. You're going to want to remember this. If nothing else tonight, you're going to want to remember this. What is a sea squirt? Well, technically, it is defined as an animal. But as a young sea squirt, after it's born, it swims through the seawater, and as a young sea squirt, it has a brain. Hello? As a young sea squirt, it has a brain. But when it becomes an adult, it attaches to the sea floor, it turns into a filter feeder like sponges and corals, and the brain dissolves away. As an adult, it doesn't have a brain. Hello? Now, please tell me, if you're only 70% the same genetically as a chimpanzee, 70% the same as a sea sponge, but you're 88% the same as a rat, and 88% the same genetically as a sea squirt, please tell me, which one are you closer to? I'll let you make up your own mind. Pastor, thank you very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that tonight. That was great. That was great. Tomorrow night, you don't want to miss tomorrow night, and you want to try to get all the young people that you can to come and attend tomorrow night, because tomorrow night it's going to be dinosaurs, and that's going to be an awesome session tomorrow evening, and hopefully we'll be able to take him into the school tomorrow and get some interest among some other kids that have never been here. So let's pray for him, that God will rest him tonight, and that also he's got to eat too. If somebody wants to take him, it's your opportunity. I've eaten so much with him, I'm about to put on weight, and I'm in a weight-losing contest. Me and Sherry Kimsey's in a weight-losing contest. But we love you tonight. I'm enjoying this. I hope you are. It's a little different, isn't it? But I'm really enjoying just lessons, coming in, lessons, and really learning. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Kind Jesus, thank you for tonight, today. Thank you for doing all that you have done for us. And God, we pray that you rest Dr. Grady McMurtry tonight. Help him tomorrow, Lord, as he speaks. And Lord, tomorrow night, Lord, as he closes out, Lord, our creation conference, Lord, I pray that you would help the people that come and those that watch online, Lord, that they would be able to learn things to be able to give them confidence in their faith. And Lord, that they grow, Lord, with courage in your word. And God, above all, may people be saved because of it. God, we'll praise you for this in the name of the Father and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, and all God's people said, Amen. Amen. Let's get our hands up in the air as we stand to our feet. Let's exercise. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God bless you. Good night.